Channel 2. This is Houston Newsmakers with Cambrell Marshall.
It was shocking news most of us were first hearing about as we woke up last Sunday morning. The tragic news that a family of 8 had been killed, murdered, allegedly by a man who was upset about the locks being changed on the house where he once lived. Of the 8 dead, 6 were children, including one of his own. The father of 5 of those kids also killed, and the woman who had been the target of previous domestic violence attacks by the suspect, David Connolly. It puts domestic violence back in the spotlight once again. Joining me this morning to talk about the challenges of stopping domestic violence and the tragic deaths that sometimes are the result, Amy Smith is the Deputy Director of the Harris County Domestic Violence Coordinating Council. Celinda Guerra is the Manager of Hotline Services at the Houston Area Women's Center. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
What were your thoughts when you woke up to hear this news last Sunday? What came to your mind? This is something you do every day to try to avoid these kinds of circumstances.
Well, usually when you wake up and you hear something like this, you're just hoping that you haven't worked with the family. You're hoping that that everyone did everything they could to help this family before this happened. And it seems like there were a lot of systems that had touched this case, and it was just a tragedy, especially for those 6 children who were pretty much innocent bystanders in this whole entire situation.
Celinda, your thoughts when you first heard about this story, because on the hotline you get calls from people who are in distress, and maybe you didn't get a call from this woman, but the sense of loss that you might have felt.
So unfortunate. We work so hard every day to try to share the information of the work that we do at the Houston Area Women's Center and get people connected to resources that will hopefully be life-saving. Unfortunately, once again, in this case, the responsibility, goes to the abuser. It sounds like we all try to do the very best, including survivors in these situations, and unfortunately, this ended in tragedy.
I want to remind people of what happened last week, although it's been in the news certainly all week long. Police were called to a North Harris County home for a welfare check. Harris County deputies originally found no signs of anything wrong, but eventually saw what appeared to be a body inside that home. They tried to get in. They were rebuffed, they say, by David Connolly, who fired a shot and surrendered after an hours-long standoff. And that's when they went inside and found 8 people dead, including Connolly's on and off again girlfriend, Valerie Jackson, her husband, Wayne Jackson, and 6 children, including Connolly's son. Connolly has been charged with capital murder and has a criminal history, which includes domestic violence against Jackson Connolly's estranged wife. She says she had to get away from him.
And I just got tired one day. I walked in the house and I'm like, I'm not going to take any more beatings, and I left and I never turned back.
They've been married 29 years. Most of it is strange because Vanessa says her husband started abusing her soon after they were married.
I was pregnant actually with my daughter, and he would threaten me, would threaten to kill me and the baby.
Connolly is now facing capital murder charges, accused of shooting and killing 6 children and 2 adults. One of them, 40-year-old Valerie Jackson, his former domestic partner.
I told Valerie to get away from him. He was very abusive.
So much wrong with this story. Valerie Jackson, who was killed and according to court records, had told authorities many other times about various kinds of abuse, but she recanted at some point. And that seems to be, is that a pattern at all when women are in these situations where they have a claim and then they take it back for whatever reason? Do you run into that?
Well, when you look at the situation, domestic violence is about power and control. It has one person has the power in the relationship and the control in the relationship. And most of the times what a victim will do is try to do everything they can to make sure that things are okay for themselves and for their children. And it's very hard and it's very difficult to leave a domestic violence situation. In fact, that's the most dangerous time, is when a woman or a man leaves a domestic violence situation, because the power and control are being taken away from that batterer. And so the question should be, why does he batter? Not why doesn't she leave, or why does she stay? Why does she recant? We're not about blaming the victim. What we want to make sure is that victims know that there are resources out there. As horrendous as this crime was, there are thousands and thousands of women and children and men that are living in domestic violence situations, and we want to make sure that they know that there's help available for them.
Well, certainly no one is going to put any blame on her for this, what happened ultimately here. Clearly, as we look at this family, there was a lot of dysfunction going on. Beside that, though, it still didn't need to no one deserved to end up the way this happened. So, Linda, what kind of calls do you get to the hotline that mimic these kind of circumstances? Do you get calls similar where people are distressed about what they should do and how they should get out?
Absolutely. A lot of our calls are about callers calling us because they don't know what to do, primarily because of fear. There's a lot of threats involved in these situations. Very important to keep in mind, as Amy mentioned, we can be quick to judge why someone doesn't leave the situation, and we shouldn't do that. Again, putting the responsibility back on the abuser, but very common for individuals to call us, and it's their first time calling. They've never talked about this before, so they're reaching out for the first time, and we try to do whatever we can to give them the information that they need.
What kind of things do you tell them initially to get them to calm, to get to a place where they can actually think about what they need to do in the next step?
The first thing is reassure them that this is not their fault. In trying to find answers to these situations, a lot of times survivors question themselves about what they could have done different or what they can do different to hopefully make a change in the situation. So always clarifying to them that this is not their fault, that there are options available, that there is help available, and we at the Women's Center are certainly here to support them without judgment, and we will respect whatever their choice might be. We just ask for an opportunity to help them identify safe ways to stay in the relationship if that's what they choose.
I noticed the website on the Houston Area Women's Center website had a letter about the whys of domestic violence, and in part the letter says the person to blame is the one who committed the crime. The violence occurred because the perpetrator made a choice. The motive is the desire for power and control. That pretty much says it all in terms of that circumstance. And Amy, I know that you work to make sure that organizations like the Houston Area Women's Center, whatever services somebody might need, your organization works to try to make sure that they get that service.
Exactly. The Coordinating Council is made up of our community partners, including law enforcement, the advocacy services, batters intervention programs. Several universities are also part of our Coordinating Council, and we're trying to make sure that we have a coordinated community response. It sounds like in this particular case there were a lot of systems that touched this family, but none of the systems seemed to work together to coordinate the services that each person had. It's sort of like everyone is working in a little silo, and it's like their part is what they're focused on without looking at the big picture to see everything that this family needed, from the law enforcement involvement, from CPS involvement, to advocacy services involvement.
Does this circumstance provide an opportunity for everybody to try to look at ways to improve the overall system and make sure that something like this, in the way that it happened, that make sure it doesn't happen again?
Yes, part of what the Coordinating Council does is we have an adult violent death review team where we review all domestic violence homicide cases. We're currently looking at cases from 2012. We need to wait until they get through the court system. And what we found when we look at those cases is that only about 5% of the women that are killed actually access traditional domestic violence services. They access law enforcement, they access their faith community, they access the medical community. So we're also working with law enforcement. We're working with the City of Houston Health Departments to do screening for the people that come in, to see if we can get them from another avenue, to see if there is something else that's happening. We're also having a multi-faith summit on September the 2nd to talk to the clergy about domestic violence, because everyone in the community needs to work together. Everyone needs to, if you know someone, you can help them. There's services that are available out there. You don't have to be an expert, because there's plenty of experts out there, but please get them in touch with someone that can help.
So Linda, what advice do you give a woman who is in a precarious relationship, doesn't quite know what to do? They might want to call, but they're concerned about calling. What kind of advice would you give that person?
Well, first of all, I'd like to mention that our crisis hotline can be completely confidential. They can share their name if they want, and they don't have to if they don't feel comfortable at that moment. The most important piece is to maybe share a little bit about their situation. And one of the things that we do through our crisis hotline is ask a series of questions through a lethality assessment tool to help us identify the level of danger that might be in, and with that be able to create a very specific safety plan to their situation. Safety plans can definitely be life-saving. So with the opportunity to make a call, hear what domestic violence is, identify what the risk factors are, and hopefully be able to create a safety plan.
We have numbers and contact information for you. Harris County Domestic Violence Coordinating Council can be reached on his website, which is hcdvcc.org, or its phone number, 281-400-3680. Houston Area Women's Center has a 24-hour hotline if you need help. The domestic violence hotline number is 713-528-2121. You can find information about other important numbers you may want to call by going to their website, which is www.hawc.org. Thank you, Amy and Celinda, for coming in this morning. Hopefully someone has heard some of what you've had to say, and maybe another life can be saved. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for talking about this very important topic.
Thank you very much.